I'm joined by Ken Vogel, political reporter for the New York Times, Katie Fang, MSNBC legal analyst, Tom Winter, investigative reporter for NBC News, who's at the courthouse in Lower Manhattan, and Omarosa Manigault Newman, author of Unhinged, an insider's account of the Trump White House. Omarosa, I wanted you on tonight because you've been very close to these men. You've been very close to Trump, very close to Cohen, to Michael Cohen, who's now sworn under oath the president was a criminal with him in terms of using money to shut up women so it wouldn't hurt his campaign. In other words, it's a campaign expense, a criminal law violated. They concealed it. It's now come out that it was done purposely as a concealed matter to help his campaign. This is a crime. He's pointing the finger at the president. How's your reaction to that?
Well, I think that for Donald Trump, he should be very concerned today because Michael Cohen has made a commitment that he is going to look out for himself and his family over his extreme loyalty to Donald Trump. I mean, we all knew that this was going to be used as a hush money kind of payment from campaign finances. You
knew at the time?
Oh, we knew. And Michael
so the
Cohen
150 to McDougal and the 130 to Stormy Daniels. All that money, it's $250,000, a lot of money. All that money was taken effectively to get him elected.
Oh, absolutely. And unfortunately, there are a lot of donors, a lot of people who gave to this campaign expecting it would go towards the victory. But instead, it was going to shut these women up. And that is illegal.
How's this going to sell among Kellyanne and people in the White House? And the people in there who work very close to the president are still tied to him. How are they going to react when they watch the news tonight? Do they believe Cohen or do they believe the president?
Well, Kellyanne believes in alternative facts, and so she'll twist this anyway.
In her own head?
In her own head, but also in Trump world, that's what goes. The truth is relative to them, and they battle with reality. But the reality today is that the hammer came down on Donald Trump, both with Manafort and with Cohen.
Let me go to Tom on this. Tom Winter, your thoughts about the crime? It seems to me that Mr. Cohen faced thousands of years in prison, practically. Why would you take a plea deal that said you can never vote again, can never be on a jury again, and you're going away for a hard time for 5 years? Why would you take that as the best deal you can get unless you face horrendously longer time, I would think?
Yeah, Chris, I mean, and I think that area that you just talked about, when the judge read to him and asked him as part of this process, you know, do you know that you're not going to vote again? Do you know that you can't run for office again? When Michael Cohen was answering those questions, that was one of the few points where his voice kind of wavered a little bit. I think the gravity of what was happening today hit him. But in case that gravity didn't hit him, Chris, the gravity of, as the judge explained it, if he was to sentence Michael Cohen to the maximum for everything that he was charged with today on consecutive terms, he faced up to 65 years in prison. So he faced a tremendous amount of jail time if he did not plead guilty to these crimes and if the sentence was served consecutively. So I think Michael Cohen was looking at some serious time here. The other thing is, Chris, these were the crimes that he pled guilty to. Perhaps there were some other crimes that may have been on the fringe that could have been included into an indictment if he didn't plead to it. So he may have been on the hook for a little bit more trouble than what we were able to find out in court today.
Let's get into the heart of this thing involving the President of the United States. It's why we're covering this case. It's the President of the United States involved. He's been figured as a felon here. And the question is, there's interpretation here. In other words, we're listening now to a man under oath, Michael Cohen, who knew the president, he was his fixer, his lawyer, saying under oath, swearing, that the President of the United States paid that money to those two women that he had the relations with, $150 and $130K total. He did that money as a campaign contribution. In other words, he has to know that that was the motive of the president, not to pay off women so his marriage would be intact or the usual attempt to make your life seem cleaner than it is, but to get himself elected. How do you explain that in court? That's an amazingly particular charge that gets to the heart of this president's lack of credibility.
Exactly. I'm so thrilled you honed in on that specific part of it, because this is not just a payoff. This absolutely has to do with the campaign itself. And, you know, Chris, when you have something like this and you say, well, you know, could Michael Cohen one day perhaps testify to something involving the president of the United States? Who knows? We may never know, and we'll see what ends up developing. But one thing that underlies testimony and makes Michael Cohen potentially very credible here is that we're talking about payments, which means that there's transactions, which means that there are records, which means there's documentation. So when you look at this, Chris, in its totality, not only are the things that Michael Cohen allocated to in court today very damning, but on top of that, these are banking allegations. These are things that have to do with payments. So I think these particular counts, as it relates to Michael Cohen and his implication of the president today, I think there's a lot of credibility to that just based on the evidence.
And Ken, to that point, we know that the president compensated him for the second 130. For some reason, he paid the 150 out of his legal stream of things. Somehow the money was poured through as part of a draw, a retainer kind of situation. But the second time, the president paid the bill.
Yeah, and that's where you get the coordination. It's not just, there's two counts here. One is an excessive contribution from Micheal Cohen.
The 150.
The other is a corporate contribution, also excessive, also illegal. You get kind of the 1-2 punch there. Now, what I think that you talk about Micheal Cohen's credibility, and we don't know what kind of additional proof beyond just his allocution and his sworn testimony he may have, but we can expect the Trump folks to come after that and say, no, he misunderstood that, he did that on his own, or he's mischaracterizing that. And so a lot will come down to his credibility, provided he doesn't have some kind of communication that might show definitively why this was done to further a federal campaign.
Well, let's go back to Katie Fang. Thank you for joining us with your expertise. I mean, the question for most of us who grew up during the Watergate, and I did went through it, and we were all aficionados of Watergate, co-conspirator. It sounds like it. What do you make of it in this case? The President of the United States was one of the people who was forking over the money to keep the woman quiet so he could get elected president as a part of a concealing effort in violation of federal laws and requirements.
So let's be clear, there was no direct identification of Donald Trump today during the plea and in the plea agreement. But let's be obvious.
The candidate
facts.
for federal office.
Come on. Yeah, exactly. We know that it's Trump. And so Trump is an unnamed co-conspirator right now in the Southern District of New York. We're interested in this because there's this old saying, Chris, right? Money often costs too much. Well, today was a costly day, not only for Micheal Cohen and for Paul Manafort. And so it's Trump. Trump is directly like the center of the spokes of all of this wheel of implication of all of these people, Manafort and Micheal Cohen. So we're looking at Donald Trump now, and we want to know what is out there in terms of evidence. Because remember, this system worked, Chris. The raids on Cohen's home, hotel, and office worked. The raids produced evidence. The raids produced evidence that was turned over to the government after the system worked for the benefit of the government, but still protecting Micheal Cohen. And so now we know that there's evidence that the Southern District of New York has, but can the president be indicted? Isn't that really what the ultimate question ends up being?
Can the Southern District Court bring a RICO charge against the president running a criminal enterprise? You mentioned the phrase.
Yeah, so here's the deal. The president, a sitting president of the United States, DOJ guidelines currently say you shouldn't and you won't be indicting the current president of the United States. Doesn't mean he can't be indicted after he sits in office. But the idea, Chris, is that Congress can impeach the president if the acts by the president are bad enough. And so why would a grand jury sitting there indict a president? But, I mean, talk about indictment in the court of public opinion. You can't get any more close in terms of a guilt by association than the words that came out of Micheal Cohen's mouth today under oath.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.